Welcome back, Matt's Doubles League. We are here for the Week 3 Power Rankings. Getting started a little bit late this week, but that is okay. I am joined tonight by Dan. Say hello, Dan.
Hello, Dan.
Brilliant. Okay, so any general thoughts on the first 3 weeks before we get started?
I think we've had a pretty exciting first 3 weeks. There's been some learning curve for people that aren't as familiar with the format, either only having played it in multi-battles and learning a bit of a transition into VGC from that, or people that just haven't played with these transfer moves and mythicals before, and a learning curve of like what can actually do what. But I think we've had a pretty good first 3 weeks. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I also I'm sort of surprised by how much more I'm left wanting to see from some of these teams after we've already been through 3 battles with, well, I guess not 3 battles with everybody, but with most players. So yeah, it's been very interesting. I'm looking forward to the next 6 weeks. So I guess we can just jump into it then. So
Fantastic.
Number 14 on our power rankings is Nick at 0-3, -5 match differential and -10 Pokemon differential. This is probably one of the slides that we're not going to spend too much time on, just because we've only had one game recorded with Nick, so we've gotten some cliff notes from a couple of other games, but we haven't exactly gotten to see as much as I would have wanted from Nick. So to me, the most notable things about how he's been playing is that number one, Trick Room, I think, really still needs to be answered by this team. You can see the transactions down there. He picked up a Pseudo Widow, which is very, very slow, as is the Spirit Tomb, but probably not really enough to actually answer that the Trick Room modes that he's going to be seeing. The Trick Room mode with Alolan Marowak from Josh kind of rolled him in this last week. So definitely something he's going to need to pick up on there. And then he also seems to be relying pretty heavily on his beat up strategy based on what I'm seeing from his pace. Which is definitely powerful, but it's a little bit less reliable in a format like this where redirection is kind of everywhere. So I think I don't know his methods for flowcharting or anything, but I would think that you need some pretty solid answer to, what if he leads redirection into my Whimsicott Terrakion? And to me, one of the most obvious answers might be put taunt on your Whimsicott and then maybe try to taunt and protect and then hope you can beat up next turn or something like that. But maybe use some of the other offensive pieces on your team, which, not to say that he hasn't been, because I think his paces are looking pretty strong. But yeah, something probably needs to change in the play department. I don't know. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, like we said, it's hard to judge the play when we've seen one match, but
Yeah.
I will say I think some of my initial critiques of the team in the Week 0 power rankings still stand. The Trick Room weakness is fairly obvious, and I'm glad he's taking some moves to address that. And then that damage output when you can't get your setup off, not sure if that's been a major problem for him in his matches, but I imagine it's been with the beat up mode looking like it's coming pretty frequently. So I think it's pretty straightforward ways that he can fix the prep and play, but there's just some issues with the team that he's going to need to work through each week until he's able to reposition it through some transactions and do something that's going to better fit what he's going to be going up against week in and week out.
Yeah, and I think your point about not the offs maybe lacking a little bit when you can't get your setup off is especially true for that Jirachi, because I know he's been that and the Terrakion have been his main max candidates as far as I know. And the weakness policy Jirachi that he's been running is definitely strong as long as you can get that off. or maybe using like a fake tears Whimsicott with a special Jirachi if you want to do something like that. But reliable proc move for that Jirachi is going to be important. I don't think I see a brutal swing user here anywhere, so that might be something you want to look into. But that'll be number 14. And moving on to 13, we have Tay. Do you wanna start us off here, Dan?
Yeah, I can talk through this a little bit. I actually think Tay's played pretty well. I don't think he's actually gotten blown out a lot, and even though he's 0-3, -6, -13, I think that is not necessarily indicative to what we've seen from him so far. I think specifically if you look at his matchup with Joshie, he did struggle with the Celesteela in game 1, but he in the end game had a chance to potentially make a play in game 1 even after the Celesteela got the +5 to come back, and that's hard to do. And I think that's something we've seen across the board for him, is that he's playing well, he's just not converting a lot of close positions, and that's not something that's necessarily super replicable. Like maybe a really good coach will convert 60% of what should be true toss-ups, but no one should be converting under 40% of what should be true toss-ups, no matter how well or poorly you're playing. So I think in the long run, this is going to even out, and he's going to have a much better record at the end of the season than he does right now. But I think you had a bit more specific critique / praise for his play and how he can improve moving forward. So why don't you want to talk about that in a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I do agree that his play has been surprisingly solid for the record here. It's like the record is really not indicative of how well he's actually been playing. There have been a lot of games that were shockingly close, especially like you said, the one against Josh. Through at least one of those games was really down to the wire. Maybe both, I can't remember exactly, but I think with some slight improvements here and there, and going the way he's going with the way that he's prepping, I think he's gonna pick up a couple more wins from this point on. I do have a couple of quick critiques here. I would probably recommend being a little bit less predictable and changing up your stuff from week to week a little bit more. Not to say that he hasn't done that, because he definitely has been, but I think like one example being that Calm Mind Mew set that he brought the first 2 weeks. I don't really think it was a great bring either time. I think Mew needs a little bit more than just the +1 special attack, but he did kind of fix that up in the last match, bringing a nasty plot set. And I think he's gonna want a little bit more like matchup specific prep. There are a few like items and moves that I've seen on his teams that seem a little bit tacked on, kind of like the leftovers on the Jellicent, that I don't have any real insight into like his motivation behind that particular decision, but it seemed kind of like something that was just like, well, it's a bulky Pokemon, fuck it, whatever, I'll put leftovers on it. I think I'm generally not a fan of like just going, fuck it, whatever, this item or this move seems fine, whatever. Like, I think for pretty much every move slot or an item slot, somebody asks you why is that there for this matchup, you should generally have an answer for that. So for something like Jellicent, usually you're probably going to want something that helps it survive and set up Trick Room in a particular matchup, which leads me to my next point. Something like a Mental Herb or a Type Resist Berry is kind of what I'm getting at there, usually. I've also seen him not prioritize setting up Trick Room when he's bringing the Escavalier Jellicent combo. I think there was one point in week 3 where he protected the Jellicent, tried to attack with the Escavalier. That didn't work out very well. There was another point where he sent in the Escavalier when he had both Escav and Jellicent in the back, and Trick Room was not set up yet. He sent in the Escav first. That didn't really work out that well. You really want to prioritize setting up Trick Room there, so that you have that speed advantage and can guarantee that Escavalier is moving first and getting really big damage off. And the last thing is to just know your speed tiers. Some of his commentary in the last match was a little bit surprising to me because he seemed unsure of what was going to outspeed what. I think at one point he wasn't sure if his Mew would outspeed Goomy's Thievul. He wasn't sure if his Urshifu would outspeed the Tapu Koko. Those are pretty significant speed gaps, so I think making sure that you nail those down before your match and you know what outspeeds what, especially with what kind of speed investment you have, is probably pretty important. So those are my critiques. These transactions are a little bit interesting. Dan, what do you think about the Dracovish and Baby Hippo?
I like the additional mode that it gives this team. I don't think Miltank was offering a lot, and I do kind of think he needed the Landorus Eye to have sort of a more special balance towards what he's able to output, especially in the fast mode. But I do like that he's able to just threaten a weather mode, and now he's got maybe a better water attacker, but then I see Jellicent potentially needing to be transacted out. I'm very split on this overall. Like, there's definitely some arguments that this is a good transaction and some arguments that they're bad transactions. I think more modes is always good, but I don't know if the Landorus Eye sacrifice is going to be worth it in the long run. What do you think?
Yeah, I have kind of the same mixed feelings that you have. I'm less concerned about having two water types here because the Jellicent and Dracovish don't share any weaknesses. So,
Except
offensively, there's what was that?
Freeze dry.
Sure, yeah. I mean, he's kind of gotten through the main freeze dry user already, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. There's some offensive overlap there, I suppose, but you're generally not bringing them in the same mode. I think they're fine, but yeah, it definitely puts a little bit more Dynamax pressure on the Mew because Landorus was going to be a better max option than a Dracovish is. But yeah, it definitely diversifies things a little bit more. Dracovish can be used with this Sand mode or with Strongjaw if you want to put it in Tailwind or slap a Choice Scarf on it. So you have some flexibility with it there. It definitely makes the team a little bit more threatening. I know that there were a few different transaction options that he was considering for that slot. I won't say what the others are, but I was a little bit surprised that this is the one that he landed on. So definitely very interesting. Overall makes the team more threatening. But I am a little bit split for some of the same reasons that you are. And that should about wrap that one up. Moving on to number 12. We've got El Flamingo. So El Flamingo's matches have been interesting in that I don't know, they almost haven't made a huge impression on me. There's what I've seen from him is like mostly standard prep with a lot of competent play. Pretty much, El Flamingo is one of these players who pretty much every time he clicks a button, it makes sense to me. It's very rarely he's doing something that makes me go, I don't know, like what is he doing? Like he's played pretty competently, even though he hasn't picked up a game yet. He did have a bye, so he's only 0-2 instead of 0-3 or 1-2. But he's had some tough matches. One of them he said was even a pretty bad matchup himself into Burst. But he managed to take both of these to Game 3. They were both definitely down to the wire at one point or another. So again, I think this is not a record that's indicative of how well he's actually been doing, and he's definitely another player I expect to pick up some wins in the future. And I'm still kind of waiting for that Colossal to come out. We saw Trick Room mode with the Colossal,
It's
of
not a
course, and
colossal team yet.
yeah, well, yes, it is. Um, anyway, when's the Colossal game? The real Colossal game, the Steam Engine Colossal game. That's what I'm wondering about. But yeah, that's about all I've got for Flamingo. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's been playing pretty solidly. I don't think we're going to see much Steam Engine Colossal in Red Division. Just looking at the teams and players there, it's not the division for Steam Engine Colossal. I'll just put it like that.
Fair.
But yeah, I mean, I sort of agree. Everything's looked very straightforward, prep and play. I do really like his transaction. I think losing the screens is a little rough, but getting more consistent snarl, foul play, icy wind, maybe even quash with Persian, like that's just going to be adding another dimension to his team. So I think that's really good for him. But yeah, I think he's going to be someone that's going to be picking up wins pretty consistently once he gets into a part of his schedule where it's not just bad matchups for him, and he had an early bye as well, so this is just a really small sample size, so there's not too much to take from it.
Definitely, yeah. I was actually a little bit surprised by the transaction. I don't know his thoughts behind it, but for me personally, I probably would have kept the Morgrim just because it feels to me like the priority on Morgrim might make it a better Spectre partner, but the speed on that, like maybe the icy wind and foul play stuff like that, is something he might value a little bit more, especially maybe, I don't know, hitting opposing ghost types with foul play when you have Spectre out, something like that. But Persian should still do all right on this team. Moving on to number 11. This is going to be TinyGambitKing. Is at a record of 1-2, -1 match differential, -2 Pokemon differential. Dan, what do you think about TinyGambitKing so far?
So, TinyGambitKing's been playing pretty well. I think there's been some issues in building that he can definitely correct in terms of getting the right speeds on different threats, the right power output, but it's nothing too detrimental for him. Like, this is another one where everything seemed pretty solid. He's had to deal with some weirdness, like max Aegislash 3 games in a row, like that kind of stuff. But outside of the weirdness, like, his play has been pretty much straightforward, and his team is improved so much compared to what it was at the start of the season, just because he picked up Tornadus Eye. Man, who would have thought tier 1 priority Tailwind that can also be a max threat and also has Defiant was a really good thing to pair with Metagross that also has Brutal Swing.
Indeed.
But man, I do agree with your comment on here that his most threatening modes have not been getting much use, which is going to be that Torn Metagross. When I had that in the PDPL, there were some times where I'm like, I see how my opponent would counter it, and they're always going to build to beat it, so maybe I'm not bringing it as much as I should. But man, if he starts bringing that more and popping off with it consistently, this team's going to look really, really threatening down the stretch, especially with that priority Tailwind speed control now. But why don't you delve into your thoughts there a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, when I say most threatening modes, that's obviously the Torn Metagross thing is at the top of that list. But the other thing I'm thinking about here is like pairing Grimmsnarl with maybe a strong special max Airstream Sweeper in that Moltres or the Tornadus. Grimmsnarl, I believe he brought at least once when he was trying to do swagger stuff on the Mudsdale. But I haven't seen him using really the best tools that Grimmsnarl has to offer, which is the screens, fake tears, and Thunderwave. Really, that's the core of Grimmsnarl's toolkit. Not that you need to use all 4 of those on the same set at the same time, but those should be cycling in and out of your Grimmsnarl sets pretty often. And I think he's been having a little bit of trouble in the beginning, a rocky start. He's at a negative record right now, and I think if with this team, if you were to lean more into those tried and true, really strong modes, that you may end up seeing a little bit more success there. And like you mentioned, there's some team building optimization issues. They're not massive things, but just things like you mentioned speed stats. The time that he was using the Swagger Mimikyu with room service next to the own tempo Mudsdale. I think the Swagger own tempo thing is a great idea. But you really want to make sure that, like, once you're setting Trick Room, the Mimikyu is actually able to move first. You get that +2 before Mudsdale attacks, and I believe, like, I don't even think he was using min speed on the Mimikyu. But in order to do that, you actually need an Iron Ball instead of a room service, and then even then Mudsdale, you have to bump up that speed IV a little bit too. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's an important thing for that kind of mode. And then I just noticed a couple other things, like running Earthquake over Stomping Tantrum when you're going up against a Rillaboom team. Probably not the best idea. He had beat up stamina stuff, and he was using close combat instead of body press. So it's little details like that that sometimes are not so little. If something like that costs you a game, it's probably not going to be as insignificant as some of this stuff might seem here. So you want to go through moves, items, speed stats. Like I mentioned on Tay's slide, I think you want a good reason for using each of those things, and also a good reason for foregoing the standard stuff that your Pokemon usually run. So probably worth taking a look at some of that stuff there. And moving on to slide number 10, we have Ty. Dan, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, so I played Ty week 1, and you put a lot of the notes on this slide, but I can agree with a lot of them. Like, his Glacier mode into me was very good, and then his Zygarde modes have looked really good into various opponents.
Yeah, I think Zygarde ended up going like 8-1 or 9-1, something like that against Nick.
Yeah, it's been impressive. Even against Burst in the match that he lost, like, the Zygarde looked like it had the opportunity to take over if he was just able to redirect the hailstorms. At one point. So I do think that there's a lot of potential on this team, but you're right. A lot of his switches have been. He's a very defensive player, and it shows. And I'm not sure if this format is the best for defensive, because unlike in the MBC, you only have 4 Pokemon instead of 6. So the max turns are going to be a greater percentage of the game, so you need to be able to more effectively utilize your offensive max turns. And if you're playing super defensively, your opponent's going to have the advantage on max turns. And if they're able to call one switch, that's going to completely throw the game in their favor. I think my match versus him, game 3 in week 1, really showed that, where I just screeched and max lightninged into a Glastrier switch in, and then he just didn't have offense for the rest of the game.
Yes, so, that was big.
Yeah, so I do think that he needs a bit more of varied threats generally, instead of just we're gonna support and just have one big threat and that's what we're gonna do. But his one big threats are both really good. I'm just nervous that if they get called out, like the hailstorm on the Zygarde or the lightning into the Glastrier, that his playstyle gets punished a lot harder than a normal good call does. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. The whole, like, protect the king type strategy with either the Glastrier or the Zygarde is definitely high risk, high reward. So I think if you're gonna stick with that, you either need to play a lot more carefully, or you need to rely a little bit more on redirection, or maybe disperse your offense a little bit more into your throughout your team, and instead of playing that kind of protect the king strategy, especially when you're using the Driftblim. I noticed he led with Lele Driftblim in this last game he had. I think it was against Burst, and it seemed a little strange because the did I say Lele Driftblim? Finny
Yes.
Driftblim.
There we go. Yep.
Yes. So he led with the Finny and the Driftblim, but the Finny was a much more supportive set, aiming at supporting that Zygarde, which is fine to have. It's just a little bit awkward when you have that kind of offensive support with the super fast Tailwind, and your Finny's sitting there not really able to make good use of that. It's kind of just firing off some rather pitiful dazzling gleams. So a more offensive Finny set there on occasion would be good, especially when you're bringing it with the Driftblim. And then the Hypnosis with the terrains. Look, I'm not one to shit on Hypnosis usually, but there are 4 terrains in the game, and you have the only 2 that block sleep. So you maybe don't do that. That's that one is pretty straightforward. Don't do that. Anything else on this one, Dan?
No, we've all been there with the terrains and sleep before.
Yes, we have. We have indeed. All right, moving on to number 9. We've got Dina, who is at a record of 1-2, -2 match differential, -8 Pokemon differential. So the beginning here has been a little bit rough for Dina. She took a pretty convincing win against Nick in the first week, and then these last 2 weeks have been a bit of a struggle, I think, for different reasons. Her match against Goomy in week 2, I think, was a little bit more of a prep issue. I didn't really feel like a lot of what she had prepared necessarily fit the matchup very well, especially with the Belly Drum Magmortar. I do like Belly Drum Magmortar as an idea. It is very fun. It just didn't seem very good into his team without some kind of like extra redirection beyond the Raichu, or without some kind of like really fast, reliable Tailwind setter or something like that could come in after the Raichu died. It was just a little bit unfortunate. It felt like the Magmortar was going to set up Belly Drum and then just kind of got flattened by things that outspeed it. And then her game against you felt a little bit more like not necessarily a problem with her prep, but with the team rather. I'm sure you can speak a little bit more to that, but looking at her whole draft, the Volcanion on your end seems rather difficult for her to handle. So what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I can agree with that. Like, on paper, Volcanion just beats this team, which is, like, Volcanion's really good, don't get me wrong, but like, you've got Boltund and Raichu as effective ways to hit it, and that's Boltund and Raichu. They're not going to be the most offensive output on those two. Like, they both have access to Eerie Impulse, for example, which could have been really good, but I don't think that it came that week. And then the Physical Blastoise was an interesting call. That was probably correct, but it was Assault Vest Physical Blastoise, which makes it a bit more difficult because that has, like, not enough damage output into the team, and I could just sort of ignore it in max and then kill it when the max ended because the residual damage was going to do more than the max moves. Like, all 3 max moves did less than the residual damage combined. And I think that the issue with this team is it just needs a better physical attacker so it doesn't have to revert to Physical Blastoise. And so it's just not like, oh, I'm just going to run Psychic Seed, Assault Vest, Max Quake into this team, and
Yeah.
I'm immune to damage. Like, I know Belly Drum Magmortar is a physical attacker, but it needs to set up that way, and it's not super consistent with the way the team is set up. Like, if you added a powerful, like, ground type or flying type, like, physical attacker on this team, that's something I would absolutely love to see transaction happen.
Yeah, I think looking at some of these Pokemon like Magmortar, like Blastoise, that can run physical but usually prefer to be special, it's good that you have those options on the team, but it's not something you want to rely on. And given how heavily special this team is, you're kind of forced to rely on it sometimes, which is not great. The Magmortar and Boltund slots just feel. We went over this in the Week 0 power rankings. It feels like they're not all that useful, and when you have a draft where you're like, okay, this one slot or maybe even these two slots are not that useful on the team, and X, Y, and Z is something that this team actually needs, well, then you should probably look to your transactions. It's unfortunate that Dina hasn't made any yet, but we still have 3 left, so there's plenty of opportunities to do that. I think the Magmortar and Boltund should be at the top of the list for trading things away, primarily, like you said, for some kind of heavy physical attacker. So anything else for Dina Slide?
Nope. I think her schedule gets a little less rough for her team specifically moving forward. So
okay,
this is another one where I think it'll even out a bit for her.
Gotcha. All right, moving on to number 8. We've got Hector. So Hector is another one of our players that we don't have a ton of information on, because he's had an early buy, so he's only played games, much like El Flamingo earlier. So Dan, this you wrote down this first bullet point here. Can you elaborate on what you mean by this one? This is interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Week 0 power rankings, like, Hector's team was the one I spent the most time looking at because I had the most varied opinions on it, and I think the entirety of my notes could be condensed into Week 1 and Week 2. Week 1 showed the weaknesses of this team. Week 2 showed the strengths. Week 1, the opponent, I believe, just set Trick Room and just absolutely crushed, because if Trick Room gets set against this team, there's legitimately nothing that he can do, because everything is so frail that it just folds into Trick Room, and it's so fast that it's always going to be moving second. So if this team isn't getting off to a good start, then it just crumbles. But Week 2 showed the strengths of this team, where he went against the Celesteela team, got some coachings off, was able to maintain speed, leverage the output, and just absolutely steamroll. Like, that's this team in a nutshell. It is the most boom-bust team, maybe in the league. Like, if it's popping off, no team's gonna pop off harder. But if it's behind, it's gonna lose really hard, really fast, which puts a lot of pressure on the first turn. Well, maybe more than for any other team to go really, really right for him. But what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. That's the Week 1 game against Joey Snorlax. It was a pretty serious blowout. And he even, there was an attempt made to counter the Trick Room, because he went with that Imprison Behem, but it just wasn't enough. I think if I recall correctly, I think Joey just set up the belly drum on the Snorlax before bringing Trick Room out at all, and the Snorlax was kind of able to just roll over Hector's team pretty good. And even if he was trying to go for some coaching stuff, the speed with which you can set up with belly drum just kind of outpaces the coaching. So yeah, that was a little bit rough there, but it was also kind of a blowout in Hector's favor in his other match against Josh, when he was able to run through him again with the standard stuff there. Definitely needs a better Trick Room answer, which I think, not going to give details, but he accidentally tried to make 2 transactions on the last transaction cycle. The other one he was trying to make was an attempt to rectify that problem. So I think that's something we'll see in the very near future. But aside from that one, he picked up the Barraskewda and the Celebi here. What do you think about these transactions, Dan?
I like the Barraskewda pickup because he dropped Latios, and Latios was on a team with Dragapult and Duraludon and didn't need to be there. But I really would have preferred to see this be like a bulky water type that's maybe a bit slower and can play a different type of game, because it just feels a bit like a Windmore on his team. Like, yes, I get that it gives him a rain mode now, but he was running Cinderace, Dragapult, a Celebi. Was anything really outspeeding him that he needed to have a rain that he needed a rain mode so he could go even faster? Like, I don't know if something like Melodic was available, or man, that Suicune would have been nice. So that first transaction, I like, but I don't love. The second transaction, similarly, I understand he picked up the Barraskewda, so he needs to drop the Suicune. I don't know if Celebi helps his Trick Room mode, and I think Suicune would have done it better, and he loses... Was that his only Tailwind setter? Again, he didn't need Tailwind, but like bulky water, Snarl, Scald, I think is more important for this team than what Celebi can offer. But maybe I'm going to be wrong and I'll see Celebi absolutely pop off. But I'm looking forward to see the transaction that addresses this Trick Room mode, because
yes, indeed.
I believe I play him the last week of the regular season, and I have a Hatterene on my team.
Yeah.
So
he's going to need something for that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what I have on the transactions. What do you think about them?
I think they make enough sense to me. He's got the Cinderace, Barraskewda, probably needs a better grass type to pair with those than the Vileplume. Wouldn't be surprised to see him drop that at some point. And the Barraskewda feels to me more. It feels to me like he's just really, really leaning hard into the coaching stuff. Maybe you want something that's a stronger physical attacker and faster than Duraludon that can also ignore redirection, because obviously anything that can ignore redirection in this format is pretty huge, and Hector has both of those things now. So for anybody who's thinking about relying on your redirector against Hector, probably maybe rethink that or have a backup plan, because Barraskewda, Duraludon on the same team is rather threatening. So I don't know how much he needed that, considering he's got the Stalwart already, and he's got the super fast physical offense with Dragapult, Cinderace, but it, diversifies both of those aspects of his team, so it's not bad. Anyway, so that's going to be it for Hector. Moving on to number 7 in the rankings, Sakimoto. Now, Sakimoto is taking over Dark King's team, who had to drop, and Sakimoto has a sword, which is kind of all we care about, because that's like the only thing we've seen from him so far is the sword. Aegislash went like, what was it, Dan? Like 9-1 or something like that in the one game he's played.
Yeah, he maxed it all. It went 3 games, but he maxed it all 3 times, and it was just the centralized part of his team. So yeah, that's really the only note we have on this team, because we've seen 1 match of 3 games.
Yes, so before Dark King dropped, he forfeited a match and then had a bye, and then Sakimoto took over and has played 1 game. So very little data on Sakimoto, but he is sitting at 1-1, -1 match differential, 0 Pokemon differential, and his Aegislash has like 9 kills. So that's kind of insane. Probably the first time I've seen a Dynamax Aegislash in a draft match, so props for that. He also elected not to make any transactions with this team, which I think is pretty fair. There's some things that I might change, but he did inherit a pretty good team, so I don't blame him for keeping it as is, certainly. So Dan, any other thoughts here before we move on?
Dynamax should Ninja win. Okay, moving on.
All right, and number 6, we have Burst. Dan, you wanna start us off here?
Yeah, so Burst has had a really interesting schedule. I think we called it a bit of a soft schedule so far, and so we're going to learn a lot more about his team moving forward. But he's had a couple of really good showings, I think most notably against Tai with the getting the Genesect in position to Ice Beam the coiled Ground Dragon thing, Zygarde. So I think he's had some decent showings, but like you can definitely see the power of Genesect on this team. But I don't really know how much he's like delved into what this team is going to be capable of moving forward into some trickier matchups for him. And really that's just about all I have for it. You put RIP week 2, so I'll let you cover week 2, but weeks 1 and 3, like, decent play, Genesect is solid, like, we know all this stuff, but I'll let you take it over.
Yeah, I actually when I wrote that first note there, I was actually thinking a little bit more of the his game against El Flamingo. Genesect obviously pulled it out for him in a pretty big way against Tai in this last week 3 match. Mm-hmm. But I think the combination of Genesect, Togekiss, Blastoise, Garchomp, and Blacephalon actually worked out pretty damn well for him in that week 1 match against El Flamingo. So I liked seeing that top half core kind of work together. I don't think we've seen much of anything from the Indeedee yet, but I'm sure we will. Week 2 was just that was the week where he got super mega ultra haxed. That was his loss. So rip week 2. That's about it. And yeah, his schedule so far has been a little bit soft. He played against El Flamingo, who hasn't won yet, and then he played against Gambit and Tai, who each have 1 win. So, and the game against Tai was particularly convincing there. So, I feel a little bit almost like I do with El Flamingo, where like some of the stuff seems kind of straightforward, and I'm still waiting to see a little bit more. So I think when he gets into some tougher matchups, it'll be interesting to see how he progresses through those. That's about all I've got there. All right, moving on to number 5. Another weird one. This is me. I have played, 2 games, is framing it generously. I think I've played exactly 1 set, same as Sakimoto. I won that one, so that was cool. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, so this absolute bozo sets up a league so that he can play this format again, and just decides not to play in the format. And he's played 2 games total, just watching everyone else play. Like, I don't even know what's going on.
I don't either.
I default to my week 0 power rankings.
The Marshadow was cool. I'll say that.
Yeah, Marshadow's good. That was week 0 power rankings.
All right. So that's it for me. Moving on to number 4. And we've got Josh. Dan, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so Josh's games have been really interesting in that I don't know if he's played a close one. Everything's been a blowout one way or another, except for game 1 of week 1. It was pretty close against Tay, but otherwise, like, game 2 and both games in week 3, if I'm remembering, were blowout wins for him, and then both of his games against Hector were blowout losses. So it's another really swingy... I think it's more of swingy performance than swingy teams. He just got stomped the week that he got stomped, and then he's just been stomping otherwise. So, obviously a strong team, a strong player. Matt still wants to see a ground type on this team, which I can agree with. But I think overall he's been playing solidly. His 2 wins, if I'm correct, were they Tay and Crabby? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
Yes. So I'd like to see, like, once he moves in against more players with wins, because of his 3 opponents, the only win that any of them have come against him. I would like to see, once he moves into more opponents that have been performing a bit better so far, how this team sort of levels out. But overall, he's been doing just about what you'd expect him to do in various matchups. So there's not too much to complain about. He's won with Celesteela and he's won with Trick Room. But what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, definitely. The fact that he's only been involved in blowouts sort of has me wondering about his consistency moving forward. I don't know if I know he's a good player, so I don't know if his performance against Hector is something we're gonna see much of. Probably not that much, but it does have me wondering a little bit about how consistent he's gonna be, and so we'll see how it goes from here. And I guess, well, speaking of blowouts, I guess we should also mention the game against Tay was a little bit less of a blowout than the other two, I think.
Game 1, definitely, yeah. Game two was kind of a stomp, but Game 1 was a really close end game with a slightly set up Mew and a +5 Celesteela.
+5, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I think there's something to be said for that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this team functions in his hands moving forward. Moving on to number 3, we have Joey, who's also at a 2-1 record with +2 and +6. So Joey's had some pretty solid games. The one against you was a little bit, if you don't count that first game that turned into an auto forfeit, it was a little bit more of a convincing loss for him. But man, the Snorlax sweep against Hector was really big, and the game against El Flamingo was much less of a blowout than the Hector game was, but it was a really good game, lots of back and forth, kind of came down to the wire there, and the Victini and Zarude on his side did quite well in that game. So the only the big thing in that first game that could have tripped him up was the odd numbered HP on the Snorlax, but he has since rectified that issue, so probably won't be a problem again, I would think. Dan, what do you think about Joey so far?
So, okay, first of all, his name is Joey. He has a Victini. He's Joseph Joestar. I will be taking no arguments about that. Matt, you might be too old to get the reference, but the younger folk will understand it.
I have no idea what that is.
That's fine. But so he plays really well, but he's also unfamiliar with the format, and I think that shows like in little bits and pieces that come through. But that also means that he's going to be one of the fastest improving coaches, which is scary because we already have him at 3 in the power rankings. Case in point, week 1, he had the HP EV issues. He's not going to have that. He's not going to make that mistake again, and he was still able to get the win. Week 2, he thought Lipard had Trick Room because he stopped looking at the screen for half a second, and then Lipard set Trick Room. And then afterwards he understood, and he's like, okay, I know how to beat that if something like that comes up again. And even though I won 2-0 except for the forfeit loss game 1, I did have to get a double protect at the end of game 2, or he would have won that set 2-0 technically. So he played me very well, despite the fact that I was putting Trick Room up in creative ways that he wasn't ready for. So I think Joey being unfamiliar with the format is something his early season opponents are going to have to exploit with like weird techs, because late season it's going to be very hard to stop him with the level of prep and play that we've been seeing out of him. Indeed,
I think that's fair. And to your point about rapid improvement, in other leagues that he's played in, I've seen pretty rapid improvement on his part too. So there's some precedent for that. It's something we should expect for sure. Any transactions you think he might benefit him?
Toxapex should never come, so getting rid of that for something that could potentially come, I think, is a good move for him. But otherwise, I like a lot of the way that this team is set up, and everything else makes sense. I don't know if it's the best. Like, I think he might need one more Dynamax threat, for example, one more super consistent Dynamax threat, but, like, there's not a lot to complain about with the team, which is nice.
I can agree with that. All right, moving on to number 2, we have Goomy. So Dan, you want to start us off with Goomy?
Yeah, so Goomy's been playing really well, obviously. He hasn't dropped a game. He's 3-0, plus 6, plus 13. And he's been able to use some creative sets because the team does have some weaknesses, namely Escavalier looks awful for this team, but he beat the Escavalier by running Fire Blast to get it.
With Iron Ball.
Yeah, with Iron Ball to underspeed it, which is wild, but it worked, and he played really well with it. I do think the Landorus Eye transaction is phenomenal for the team with what it wants to do, getting rid of the Amoonguss to add it. Yeah, it makes it a little softer to Trick Room, but he also was able to upgrade his Uxie to Reuniclus. So I think the team is coming together more solidly now. I like a lot of what it looks like, and he's just been piloting it really well. I mean, as the progenitor of Coco Thievel, I'm glad to see someone else is using it and not just imploding, because I've seen so many people just implode with it. So good on Goomy. He's getting close to graduating high school, and he is playing like he is becoming a man, so we are proud of him. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, the transaction is decent. There was another one that he got sniped on, which I speculated in our last power rankings that he might be going for, but the Landorus is a decent backup. With the Reuniclus and the Gigalith here, I'm not worried about him being soft to Trick Room. That looks good enough to me. Togetic too, I suppose. It's mostly just a follow me bot, but Goomy's also shown us that it can be more than that, and it is pretty slow. So it's at this point when we're getting into the highest ranked teams, there's a lot less to say. Not much to complain about. Not much as far as like critiques that we're going to be able to give. So good transactions, good job, fixing up the team from the one that he took over. Creating something more to his liking, and just solid play so far. Like you said, hasn't dropped a game. There was a little bit of a dispute about whether he should be number 1 in the power rankings, because he is number 1 in the overall league standings. But I'll let you explain why this is the way it is on the next slide, Dan.
Okay.
So speaking of Dan, he is he's at number 1 for our week 3 power rankings at a solid 3-0 record with a +4 match differential, +8 Pokemon differential. Again, not too much to say here other than just hey, good shit. Volcanion has definitely been an absolute unit these past couple of weeks. It's been rather difficult to stop. It almost felt like the teams that it's beaten were not very well equipped to beat it, or didn't prepare for it very well, or a combination of the two. And Volcanion is just a very, very strong Pokemon anyway, so it's done very well here. I think we've seen some pretty strong Trick Room usage from you, especially against Joey with the copycat stuff. That was very interesting to see. The Max Hatterene mode definitely gave him a little bit of trouble, or a lot of trouble. And then the Volcanion actually in Trick Room against Dina was very interesting to see as well. So overall, just good stuff. Very powerful team. We've been using it exactly as one would expect. And congratulations on having the loudest controller in the entire league.
So I'm not sure if that's my controller or if you hear me typing into the calculator because I have a mechanical keyboard too.
Oh, no,
So
it's your
okay,
controller.
just making sure. Like I've got both that are pretty loud. But yeah, Volcanions 13-1. That's basically all you need to say about that. Uh, I felt really good playing with this team. I've been able to do some cool things like max HP, max defense to JosheeWashie, which lived a crit max steel spike off of a life orb Duraludon. Like, there's just been some creative things I've been able to do with it. It's been a lot of fun. The reason that we ended up ranking me above Goomy, and this one was one we had some discussion on, is strength of schedule considerations. We've both played Dina, so that's a bit of a wash, but I've played Joey and Ty, and specifically Joey raised my strength of schedule given how well he's been performing so far, above where Goomy's is, because I believe, I can't remember exactly who he played, but we just thought my path has been a bit harder so far, and we've both been playing really well, and we are within one game differential of one another because I'm at +4, but one of my 2 losses was that forfeit loss because I gemmed something incorrectly. So we thought that that was close enough that the strength of schedule was a better tiebreaker than that. So yeah, overall very happy with how everything's been performing and really like the team. Matt, if you were to make a transaction on this team, what would it be?
Oh, God. Zera Aura for Necrozma, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what really convinced me that Dan should be in the number 1 slot instead of Goomy was remembering that the forfeit loss in game 1 against Joey, because a forfeit win or loss is not really going to be indicative of how strong of a player somebody is or how good their team is or whatever. It's not really it shouldn't really be a factor in the criteria that we use to judge the power rankings. So I think if that had been a more legitimate game loss, I think to me the difference in match differential and Pokemon differential really probably would have overrided the strength of schedule by just a bit. But I think with that it felt a little bit more equal to me. The 1 and 2 could kind of go either way, but we ultimately settled on putting Dan here. Are you, since you asked about transactions, you don't have to give any details, of course, but are there any transactions in your future here?
I mean, I look at it each week, but I've been fairly happy with the way that the team's looked on paper, so I haven't really felt the need to, given what's available. But we'll see if something comes up that pops into my head as something that might be better.
Yeah, the team's been doing well, so yeah. I think that's very fair. So moving on, we have our Week 3 standings here. In Red Division, we've got Goomy and Dan in the top 2 spots, both 3-0, and then me at 2-0, Joey at number 4 at 2-1, Dina at 1-2, and then El Flamingo and Tay at the bottom both have yet to pick up a win. Blue Division, things are a little bit tighter. Josh and Burst up there at 2-1, Hector and Sakimoto at an even record at 1-1, Gambit and Ty at a slightly negative record at 2-1, and then Nick is down at 0-3. So just to remind everybody, slots 1 through 3 in each division will have a bye into the top 8 round of playoffs, and then seeds 4 and 5 in each division will play against each other for the last 2 slots in top 8. But of course, we still have 6 weeks to go before we get to that point. So, Dan, any thoughts on these standings before we wrap up?
Yeah, Red Division is going to be a bloodbath. 4 of the top 5 in power rankings, and all of the top 3 are in Red Division right now.
Yes, indeed.
It's going to be a tricky division to navigate through. So I'd be surprised if it didn't even out a bit more with the standings as well. But I guess we'll see moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And it is Worth noting that in week 1, I think Red Division, week 1, of course, was our cross division matches. Red Division won 5 out of those 7 games, if I'm remembering correctly, something like that. It was a pretty massive win for the Red Division. So you're going to see quite a bit more wins over there, especially if if we have a repeat performance in the last week, which is our other cross division week. So will be very interesting to see how all this plays out. But yeah, that's going to do it for us. Those are our week 3 power rankings. We're recording this a little bit late. I know that there are a couple of week 4 games that were already played, but I actually have no idea how those games played out or who won or anything. So those have not been factored in here. But yeah, that'll do it for us. Good luck to everybody in weeks 4 through 6. After week 6, we're going to be doing another one of these, and we'll have a little bit more accurate of a playoff picture for you at that point. So will be very interesting to watch. So that's going to do it for us. Peace.